This course is going to deal with three questions. Who is Israel? Who is Jesus? And who is the church? Over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to see how answering each one of these questions has implications for the other two. In fact, the three are intimately related one to the other. The first part of our course, logically, is going to begin with the question, who is Israel? And in order to answer that question, perhaps the best place to turn is a text in the Bible in which that question is directly answered. I'm thinking of a text from the book of Exodus, chapter 4. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles which I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. And you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay your firstborn son.'" The key sentence in this text comes from verse 22, when Moses says, "Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son." This text identifies Israel as God's firstborn, or indeed beloved son. And what we see in this text is the degree to which we understand Israel as this particular son. We'll learn more indeed about the divine Father who brought her into existence. The best place to begin one's investigation of the mystery of Israel is at the very beginning of the Bible. One of the first stories we read, familiar to nearly all Bible readers, is the story about Adam and Eve. God allowed them to eat of every tree in the garden save one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve, however, quickly violate this command and eat of that tree, and as a consequence for this act, they're driven from the garden. But things go even worse when we turn to the next story in the Bible. There we learn that Cain, jealous over the fact that Abel's sacrifice was accepted while his was not, decides to slay Cain. And this in turn sets in motion an avalanche of violence that begins to become so bad, so tragic, so extreme, that God makes the decision that it would have been better to have not to have created the world at all. He decides to send a flood to destroy the world, but before doing so, he picks out one righteous individual by the name of Noah, who will survive the flood, with the hope being that this righteous individual will bring about a new race of humankind that will act better than the race that was destroyed. However, immediately after the flood, we learn in the Tower of Babel that humankind is back to its rebellious ways. God now seems to be in something of a pickle. After the flood, he vowed never again to destroy the world. Yet after the flood, humankind seems determined to return to its sinful ways. What is God going to do? The solution to the problem, we learn, is a somewhat surprising one. In chapter 12 of the book of Genesis, God steps into the arena of human history and selects an individual, Abram, later to become renamed Abraham, to do his bidding. This text, which is one of the most famous texts in the entire Christian Bible, reads as follows. "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse. And by you all the families of the earth shall bless themselves.'" Through this individual, somehow, the Bible intimates, God is going to set out to correct the errors that have beset humankind up to this point in the Bible's narrative. The story then moves along. Abraham and his wife Sarah eventually give birth to a son by the name of Isaac. Isaac, in turn, will marry a woman by the name of Rebekah and produce two children, Jacob and Esau. Jacob famously is going to be renamed Israel in two different stories within the Bible. We're going to look at the second of these two stories. In this story, Jacob has just returned from a long exile in the land of Aramea, where he met his two wives, Leah and Rachel. Just before he crosses into the land of Canaan, we find a very peculiar story in which Jacob wrestles with an angel during the evening. The story reads as follows. The same night Jacob arose and took his two wives, his two maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and Jacob's thigh was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Tell me, I pray, your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" For there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God," in Hebrew El, "face to face," panim or pen, hence the Hebrew name Peniel. "I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved." This renaming is crucial for our purposes because we're going to learn something very substantial about the people Israel through the character Jacob. In fact, this individual represents what folklorists would call an eponymous ancestor. By being renamed Israel, we as readers are alerted to the fact that this individual and what he does in this story reflects on the whole people that he will create. The phenomenon of an eponymous ancestor is a frequent phenomenon in the Bible. We can think, for example, of the figure of Levi, who became the father of all the priests known as Levites, or the figure of David, who gave issue to the house of David. In each of these instances, the stories about these founding figures are stories not simply about them as individuals, concrete individuals. They are that, but they're much more. They're stories that tell us something about an entire institution that's to be formed, either the Davidic kingship, Levitical priesthood, or in this case with Jacob, the people Israel.